Things are about to come up, so let's take a chair and talk about The Naked Gun.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. As you can see, it's just me on camera this week. We've got some not technical issues. We've just got some bandwidth issues with Daniel whilst he's on holiday, but he's still here to record and to give you his thoughts on The Naked Gun, which we're talking about this week. But before we get into that, Daniel, do you have movie recommendations for the people?
So this week I watched season 2 of the Frasier revival. I think I mentioned season 1 sometime last year, and back then I said it took a while to find its legs and kind of hit its stride. And the second season, I think, is very much follows on from that. So Frasier, just very briefly, is one of my favorite sitcoms of all time. It's like a mid '90s to early 2000s comedy about this psychiatrist who lives in Seattle and kind of tries to join Seattle's high society while he's kind of hosting this lowbrow call-in radio show where he gives psychiatric advice. And Frasier is basically like a masterclass in the hilarious misunderstanding, which is the basis of a lot of sitcoms. But Frasier really took that to the next level. It's got some of the smartest writing and kind of understands how this brand of comedy works probably better than anything else. And so the revival is follows very much in those footsteps. It's 20 years later, and Frasier's at a different part of his life, and he's now kind of a psychology professor, and he's kind of moved in with his 30 something son, and he's got a whole bunch of new characters that kind of that the plots revolve around. And the second season compared to the first season, I think is I think overall better in quality. They do these hilarious misunderstanding plots where an entire episode kind of starts off as a simple misunderstanding or a simple lie, and then it snowballs into something ridiculous, and by the end it's all one big disaster, which has always been the appeal of Frasier. And they managed to kind of rekindle that formula, and they managed to apply it to kind of the current times. So it's not simply a rehash of the main series, but it's actually kind of builds on it, and it kind of makes decent use of the character being in a different place than he was at the end of the original show. There's also more cameos from from characters from the earlier show, which are a mixed bag. Some of them work quite well, and others are kind of throwaway. But overall, if you like good comedy, Frasier is certainly that, and it's one of the few revival shows where like they pick up an old show 20 years later and it actually works. It's not quite as good as the original, but season 2 is better than season 1, and it kind of understands what worked about the original show, and kind of it builds on that. So it's just a good watch, and it's solid comedy, and it's entertaining. So that's my recommendation for the week.
Yeah, I was going to mention that we seem to be getting a lot more legacy series coming back. So I know it's been a whole thing in the movie industry to bring back old franchises, make new ones for new audiences. But it seems like we're getting a lot of those for legacy TV series as well. I know there's one that I'm like hesitant to get into, which is Dexter Resurrection, just because how much I enjoyed Dexter at its time. And again, like you said, is that whenever they bring back these old series or old movies, sometimes it's not executed the same as when you first watched it, or it doesn't bring back the same feelings. But good to know that Fraser definitely does that, especially in season two, as you mentioned there. Not one that I've particularly watched myself, Fraser, but one that I am aware of and may potentially check out at some point.
Yeah, I can count on one hand the number of legacy sequels that actually worked, and this is one of them. And the reason I was kind of so pleasantly surprised by season 2 is that it would have been very easy for them to run out of steam after one season and very quickly settle into a routine of kind of just jangling keys and member berries and recycling old jokes. And they managed to not do that. And I hope they keep that up for a couple of more seasons, because it's kind of weird. Like this actor has been playing that character since the 80s. And this is kind of essentially the third show on which he plays that character. And I'm just kind of surprised and a little bit amazed that they actually made one that works. And off the top of my head, I actually can't think of a second one. There must be at least one other. But yeah, this is one that's successful, I would say.
On my side, so I was just flicking through TV the other day, and it's quite often the case where there's a really old movie that I watched when I was younger that is on, and it just kind of grabs my attention, captures me. And this time around, it was Matilda, and this is old school kids movie. I think it was like written by, or the book was written by Roald Dahl, and the whole idea of it is you have this, bright kid, too smart for where she is in the school, too smart for a family and whatever. And they're in the school, they've got a horrible head teacher, and this and the other. You kind of the story of Matilda. It's not one that I have to like rehash too much, but it's just one of those movies that really captured, really like really good charm, or like really good heart in the movies that you've had in the early 2000s, or whenever this came out. It's like a really nice, warm, family friendly movie. You kind of remember where you were when you were watching this when you were younger. You remember the key moments within the movie as well. The scenes with like Miss Trunchbull and the kitty and the cake and stuff like that, and when Matilda's at a house and stuff like that. It's just all great, and it was all good nostalgia that I just kind of flicked on, saw it was on, and was like, okay, I'm gonna give this a watch, just because it just gives me a nice warm feeling anytime I watch it. So for that reason, if you haven't checked out Matilda, or you haven't watched it in a very long time, I would recommend it. I'd recommend it. Maybe just bring some family around, bring your family together, and just stick on a nice little classic. I promise you, it'll give that warm feeling that it gave me.
Yeah, I think that movie, I remember kind of seeing it, I think in school in like sixth grade or something like that, and then it kind of being on TV a lot, and so I must have seen it or fragments of it a whole bunch of times, and it's certainly one I remember liking at that age, and I wonder how well it would hold up.
And with that, time to move on to the reason why we're all here, and that's to discuss The Naked Gun 2025. Daniel, do you want to give the people a quick synopsis on the movie?
So The Naked Gun is a spoof comedy, which is kind of a soft sequel to the 1988 classic. It follows Lieutenant Frank Dreben, no relation, to the as he investigates two different crimes, one of them being a bank robbery, and the other one being the apparent suicide of a software engineer. Um, and it turns out over the course of the plot that both of these cases are surprisingly related and culminate in the bad guy's plot to end the world using a plot device. So, what did we think of The Naked Gun?
As a movie itself, I thought it was pretty cool. I thought, the away from the jokes, the story that it was telling, the characters that were involved, the whole kind of like plot and stuff like that was all fine and would make for a good movie, no matter what the genre was, whether it was like a comedy or some action, or whatever the case might be. On the comedy side, I think it left a lot to be desired for me personally, but I think comedy is very subjective, and you have to kind of go in knowing what type of comedy it is and knowing whether it's the type of comedy for you. And unfortunately for me, it wasn't. It again. I think we had this discussion with the original Naked Gun, where I can appreciate it, but it's not all the way for me. And one thing I tried to pay attention to was the audience in the cinema, because when I went to go see it, there was a lot of older folk in the movie theaters, presumably people that had seen the original Naked Gun movie, and we're going back in there to kind of see if this movie recaptured the spirit of the original ones. And I think there was probably about like a 10% laugh out loud rate in the cinema overall. I don't think there was like much of a reaction for the majority of the movie. And I know things are always meant to be happening in the movie, or like there's always meant to be jokes, and there's every minute of it there should be like kind of like something happening in the foreground or the background. But I don't know whether it was just going over my head or whether I was missing stuff. But I felt like there was like quite a few times where it was too serious and there wasn't enough comedy going on, whether in the background or in the foreground. But saying that, there were bits that I liked. There were, particular laughs that I did get out of the movie. Not like laughs out loud, but like just like, little chuckles to myself, or just kind of like smiles of amusement at certain things in the movie. But I think overall, it's just not all the way for me, and I think that's just like more a personal thing. And I think it's just this movie is very much down to your preference for what type of comedy you enjoy in the film. And in that sense, I think it just missed it for me.
Yeah, I think we have an almost opposite reaction. I think I have an almost opposite reaction compared to you. So for me, the humor mostly landed. I think there's some recycled jokes in there. I think there's some obvious jokes in there. There's some obvious Seth MacFarlane jokes, which I normally like his humor. I like Family Guy and things like that. I'm even one of the three people in the world who likes A Million Ways to Die in the West. So I generally like his humor, but you can see there were a couple of jokes in there that were recycled from 10 seasons ago from Family Guy, where where you kind of saw that they had to pad out some of the jokes a little bit. At least that's kind of my impression. But I think there's some quite good ones in here, and a lot of decent ones, and a couple that didn't land for me at all. But overall, I think the humor is mostly what it's supposed to be, except for in the last third where the jokes almost entirely go away, and it's all action and plot. And I think that was a big mistake. I think they absolutely should have tied the resolution to the humor, or make it a joke in some way, or some big payoff to some joke that's been built up over the course of the movie, or something like that. But I think the ending felt almost obligatory, where it's kind of just a fight, and it's not tied. Like it should have been. It wasn't really as tied to a joke as I think it could and should have been. But in the first half, I think both the jokes are stronger, and I think that is also where all of the classic Naked Gun jokes are. Lots of background jokes, which we'll talk about in a minute. But also, I thought the pacing was really good, and the story was actually engaging. And like, at least for the first two thirds, I thought it all really fired on all cylinders, and then kind of ran out of steam a little bit too quickly, which is a problem when the movie itself is just 85 minutes. So I think this is the kind of movie that needs to be short and sweet. But here they didn't even have 85 minutes worth of material for the jokes, is kind of my impression. But the ones that they have, for the most part, I liked. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's actually we are really opposite, because I didn't mind how it ended, and I actually thought that there were enough jokes in the final sort of part of the movie. The whole I know you said that you didn't like that it ended up in the fist fight, but I thought it was quite funny. That's kind of one of the chuckles I had was when you thought they were going to get into like a serious fight and he punched him, and it's like clearly this guy with all of this money and all this wealth that just hires a bunch of goons. Clearly, he doesn't know how to fight and shouldn't know how to fight, so he just gets hit once, and he's like completely winded and doesn't want to fight anymore. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that was fine. You had the whole element of the owl that's meant to be his dad. Again, it's not the funniest joke, but I was like, okay, it's all right. And then his whole speech to his girlfriend, whatever her name is, about exacting, like getting revenge, and like the whole like typical cliche thing is that it's not worth it. Like like you have to like live with it after this point. It's not going to bring the person back, whatever like that. But he was just like, even though it would be like super great, like on whatever like that, you got to think about our future. So I thought the ending was fine enough. Probably had enough kind of jokes going on. Not to mention like Dave Bautista stepping in for him as well, whilst because he had another chili dog, he had to go to the toilet.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, the Dave Bautista cameo did not really work for me. Like, I don't know. It was missing something. Like, I think that falls another category of, there's a whole bunch of jokes in here that are just a little bit too obvious, and then they don't do anything with it. It's like, yeah, like this whole thing about. So first of all, I didn't pick up on the chili dog thing, and part of that might have been that I had to watch a translation. I had to watch it dubbed in German, and they actually did a decent job with it. But there's a couple of lines where I said, okay, I can imagine what this line was originally in English, and this sounds hilarious, but it doesn't quite work in this version. I think the part about the chili dog kind of got drowned out a little bit, and the fact that he's just kind of there. being a stand-in, and that's kind of the only thing they do with it. That I think that's the reason why it didn't quite land for me, and it's one of the few. So there's maybe two or three others where it just didn't land for me at all. Not that it was terrible or anything. It's more like, yeah, what's the point kind of thing, or this could have been so much more. The reason I tend to kind of not be big on the ending is there's a few different aspects to it. One of them is it's kind of a collection of smaller jokes and then not the strongest in the movie. It feels like at that point they kind of run out of time or energy. And like things the thing about, the is it Kane, the villain, right? He going down after one punch, that's a little bit of an obvious joke. And it's also kind of reminiscent of a Family Guy joke. And for that reason, it felt a little bit like this is it. Like this is what it's all been building up to. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of why it was a little bit deflated towards the end for me, especially since I thought the jokes in the beginning were stronger. And so if a comedy kind of peters out as opposed to building up to a big explosion, I think it's the wrong way around. And maybe that's difficult to do over 85 minutes as opposed to the 22 minutes of a sitcom. But I've just seen like Family Guy episodes specifically do this, like where it kind of all builds up. And and other comedies too, right? I mentioned Frasier earlier, and that is really a master at that, where everything leads up to that one big catastrophe, basically. And it's I think if you're making a comedy, then maybe you should do that. So I think that's kind of the main reason why I was a little bit underwhelmed by the end of it.
No, and that's fair. And I think probably you were a lot more engaged with the movie than I was, because I think the reason I was appreciating the ending a little bit more was because I was ready to get out of the cinema. Not that I hated the film or anything like that, but I was like, okay, this is clearly not my cup of tea. I'm just kind of like waiting for this to end. So I think I just like appreciated it a little bit more and just kind of like appreciated the straightforwardness of everything a little bit more. And I think I actually enjoyed Dave Bautista just because it's Dave Bautista, and I just like didn't expect him to be there, and he was there, and I was like, oh, it's Dave Bautista, and it was just like pleasant, and it was just like nice, without really thinking too deeply about the joke in itself and like anything else that they could have really done with that. But I'm actually surprised that you said that the start of it was like more joke heavy, because everything after the initial like bank robbery that goes on, and it's mainly I think around the when they're on the scene of the car crash, I thought there was like big stretches there of parts where it was just kind of like dialogue and like serious dialogue without much jokes happening. And of course, like you're never too far away from a joke, but I felt like there were some gaps in those particular scenes where there just wasn't any jokes being fired off, or there wasn't anything really funny happening, or maybe it was in a particular line, but the line didn't maybe land for me. Say, I think that's where I was like first being like, oh, we're not doing what we're meant to do in terms of like having jokes in the foreground or in the background.
Yeah, there certainly are stretches where there's nothing funny going on, and it doesn't have to be a laugh every minute, but like I do think there needs to be something going on. And if you have several minutes where there's just average police procedural dialogue going on, that's a bit of a problem. And I think it becomes more of an issue as the movie goes on. There's a little bit of it in the beginning, and I think there it's mostly like to connect scenes and stuff like that and to make the plot make sense at all. Whereas towards the end, especially as they kind of uncover the big plan, and kind of move into position for the big MMA fighting sequence, like in the Ponzi scheme dome, which was decently funny by itself. But it takes over at that point where the jokes get fewer and just the plot, like the plot gets more common. I've actually got another complaint about the ending before we move on to kind of the funnier bits, and that is that there's not much of a joke in the villain's plan, right? Where the idea is essentially that he's this billionaire who is kind of alienated from the world and thinks the world has gone down the drain and it's not the way it's supposed to be, and you're not allowed to do and say anymore what you used to be. And the people who have the power now, or who he has to share power with now, kind of didn't earn their place and are not his equals. And his whole plan is about destroying the world so that people have to fight to survive, and those who survive that collapse will be worthy to share the world with afterwards, right? And I think that's a fine plan. Like his whole presentation about presenting that is okay, but the ending of it kind of doesn't really tie into that at all. It's kind of just a fight at the end, especially people fighting each other, and there doesn't seem to be a punchline to the villain's plan or the way Dreben stops him. And Dreben especially does not have an answer at all. He has no response at all to what the villain is doing, right? Not even in the form of a joke or something. Like, I think that is kind of something that drags it down as well, where it's like, why can you not do anything funny with that? You know what I mean?
I'm trying to think back to the original movie because the original plan was for them to assassinate the Queen in the original movie, and I don't
Yeah.
know whether like you'll remember more clearly than I did. Was there that comedy that you're looking for in that original movie that they didn't sort of recapture in this movie?
There wasn't really, like, there were jokes surrounding Dreben trying to stop, the mind controlled assassin. So this is not about this is what the original did, therefore the sequel should have done it. It's more like both of them don't do it. And I also, if you go back to our conversation about the 88 Naked Gun, I think we both were not very high on the ending either, right? And I think that is kind of, I think they kind of share kind of like a similar issue where they don't, like, there's no culminating joke about the villain and their plan and the way Drabin stops him. And I think that is kind of the part where I kind of checked out a little bit, or was no longer as engaged, where I didn't feel like we were going somewhere. We're kind of just concluding the plot at this point. And like, the style of Naked Gun is very much like like random disconnected jokes. So I understand that that's not necessarily on the minds of the writers, right? They just kind of want a basic plot to then hang the jokes on, and that's fine. But I'm trying to kind of understand why I didn't care about the ending really much, and I think that is why. I think if the way Dreben stops him was the punchline, I think I would have been much more engaged. And I'm sure there's other options too, where like that's not the only way to end a movie like this. But it's more like that's kind of what was on my mind as I was watching. It's like, why am I not enjoying this, or not as much as I want to? And I think that's the reason.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of taste because again, I was a little bit more positive on the ending, and but I think it's just a case of going in there and having certain expectations or trying to like look for certain things which make it a little bit better. So yeah, I think that's one where you can kind of agree to disagree because I thought it was fine how they handled that particular ending, but I guess kind of
Do we have any favorite jokes, especially you, since like the humor is not quite your thing? Did you have any favorite jokes?
yeah, I had a couple at the very start of the movie. Actually, during the bank robbery, it's when they're doing, he's kind of fighting everyone, whatever. But it's the one specific one where he's doing hand to hand combat, and then they transition into doing what I can't remember what it's called when they're doing like the clapping thing that like the girls like little girls do in the school playground. Why can't I
Yeah, I
remember
think
the
it's
name of that?
patty cakes. I think that's what it's called.
Patty cakes. Yeah, patty cakes or whatever you choose to call it. But that I actually enjoyed. The other one that I actually really liked was when they set the trap for Kane's henchman to confess, and then it turned out that it was a trap to catch Frank Dreben for all the shady police business that he's been doing, and then he just then flips it back onto them and be like, "Oh, this is like a trap for you guys illegally like you." I can't remember what it was exactly, but I actually really like that joke as well in this movie. Other ones. There was another one in there.
Yeah, just in the bank robbery scene, one little detail I really liked is he uses one of the robbers as a human shield, and he throws him at the other robbers, and they just keep firing at him even though he's lying on the ground, because he's a human shield, so they have to hit him. So that was a nice little gag.
Yeah, I did like that one as well. I did like that one.
So that's exactly the kind of stupid little detail that I want out of a Naked Gun movie.
No, agreed. Yeah, one of the recurring ones I actually liked was just the handing of the coffee because, again, in these police procedurals or any kind of like cop movie or TV show, you always have someone that turns up with a cup of coffee for whatever reason. So I like that they kind of riffed on that, and it just got more and more ridiculous each time. So, kind of started off with them getting rid of a coffee and being handed an even bigger coffee mug. And then the one where he's like driving down the road and he's like monologuing or whatever, or he's narrating, and then someone hands him a cup of coffee through the window while he's driving. It's like, okay. And there's like loads of like other places where they sort of throw that in there as well, where it's just like just being handed coffee randomly, and like someone might give them a coffee, they throw it away, and then they just handed another coffee straight after. So yeah, I really like that one as well.
Yeah, that was a running gag that never got old for me. And that is also one that they keep developing, right? Like because it's not simply people keep handing him coffees. He's also like this. It just keeps going to more and more absurd situation, including like having an entire table full of coffee cups because people just keep getting more coffee. Yeah, so that was one of these that like I think there's a couple of jokes in this that are a little overused where they just keep happening, but this was one of them that was like I think part of it is that it's very quick and they don't make a big deal out of it. It just keeps happening in the background basically, and for that reason, I think it doesn't overstay its welcome, and because they keep developing it.
What about for you? What were some highlights for you?
So I'm just a big fan of really dumb puns, and so when Dreben tells Beth to take a chair and she takes a chair and walks out, I'm just on board with that. Like when that happens, I'm happy. That's just what I want out of a movie like this. Other jokes, I love the noir narration, and every time Beth kind of enters a room or walks away, people have this noir narration about and the first time she leaves the police station, the entire police station has these internal monologues, and they kind of just crowd each other out. I really like that joke. Another one was what else? Like the whole like they recycled the Austin Powers joke about somebody watching like when they're in Draven's apartment and she cleans the oven and he like he feeds the dog and like through the thermal imaging it looks like something very different, and that is like that is one to one taken from Austin Powers, but I thought that worked, and I'm always on board with that kind of humor. It's like really small like really stupid things as well, like when they try to pull the car out of the river and they use this amusement park grabbing claw that keeps dropping the car, stuff like that. Like I'm really on board with that. There were a bunch of background jokes, like the cold case room is actually like a freezer. So that was fun. The way they kind of take the noir dialogue to extremes. Really want to see it in the original because in the dubbing it doesn't quite come through. But when they are at when Beth shows up at Revan's apartment and they have this very steamy like noir dialogue, and it just gets more and more absurd and more obscene. I was really on board with that. Like there's just a whole bunch of jokes here, where or where like he's in the electric car and he first breaks his windshield and then runs over the balloon guy, so his car is full of balloons, and then he runs over the beekeepers, so his car is full of bees, and then he runs over the people carrying a windshield, and the windshield just plops back into his car and traps him in there with the bees and the balloons. Like stuff like this, like a lot of these really dumb jokes that are kind of obvious but that just work. And because this is so serious and like there's no silliness in this, like nobody makes like fun like every time like the ones that work are the ones where they're serious and deadpan and don't don't wink at the camera, and there's a couple that don't quite work as well where they just make silly noises. And like one that didn't work for me really was where the body cam where Frank has kind of evidence like footage on his body cam about like to incriminate the one guy who was part of the bank robbery, and it's like this long extended sequence of him just being pathetic. That didn't work for me at all.
Yeah, I think I agree with that one. I don't think I think that's one where they stretched the joke a little bit too long, and then it kind of lost its steam towards the end of it, and you're like, okay, like we get the point now with that one. Were there any others that didn't quite work?
Didn't like the Buffy joke. If there was a joke there, I didn't see it because did you get that one? Like was there something I just didn't get,
I
or
don't
how
think I
did
got
that one
it.
land for you?
I didn't get it, and I'm not familiar with Buffy the Vampire Slayer like that. So I probably one that I just let go of my head.
I don't think that one was actually about Buffy. It was about him not him really being into the show, and Beth having erased it because she took his TiVo without asking and then overwrote all these episodes. And I think that kind of feels like half a joke. Like it's not been established that he's really into his TV shows. It's not been established that he's really into Buffy. It's or it felt like or that he really cares about her not taking stuff without asking. You know what I mean? Like it feels like there's a setup missing. So that was a really weird one, and I wonder if half the joke was cut out in editing.
Yeah, I think yeah. No, I remember the joke that you're referring to now. And I don't know whether that's like a play on like people relating to others recording over things that they had saved previously or something like that. But if it is, then it's a little bit outdated for modern times because people don't do that anymore. I would say. But again,
Yeah,
like I didn't get the point of it.
yeah. I just didn't get the punchline. It's like it feels like this is out of character. And there was another thing where there's a couple of instances where the joke relies on Dreben being a different character in particular scenes, right? So this is one of them, right, where he's really upset about this and it seems to come out of nowhere. And then the whole thing about the body cam footage, it feels like that would be funny if it was set up or foreshadowed in some way, where him being insecure or something like that, or not being as tough as everybody, thinks, or whatever it might be. Like it seems like it needed that, where it's just it like it's one of those things that is just kind of silly, and he's just being dumb, as opposed to there being a real joke. And I think it could have been a real joke if it had been some kind of payoff to something that was set up earlier, that is tablet like where his characterization was more consistent, and then we kind of see what he's like when he's not on, like if this was the first time we saw what he's like when he's not on duty, and then that, what I mean, you know what I mean, like you could construct a joke in that in some way, and it doesn't feel like they did. Just felt kind of random, and he's just being weird and pathetic for the sake of it.
For me as well, it's all the like kind of like fart and poop jokes and stuff like that don't always work for me. I feel like I feel like it's a crutch that a lot of people use for like comedy sometimes, and I don't know why because there's a lot of funnier ways to be. There's a lot of other ways to be funny as opposed to just like kind of like piss and fart jokes and stuff like that, which I never really 100% appreciate in these type of movies.
I feel like there was one where I thought, as I was watching it, oh yeah, you're not going to like this one, and I thought it worked for me, but I can't quite place it now. Was there like a major one?
There was the one with the chili dog. It was on during the recording in the chili dog with the chili dog. So like the one where like Dave Bautista steps in because they've like already established that he eats so many chili dogs and messes up his stomach and stuff like that. And the fact that that joke is over very quickly, it doesn't overstay its welcome with Dave Bautista standing in for him. I think that was okay. I could accept that one. That wasn't like too much of a problem. But it was like again during the looking at the body cam footage and it was just kind of going on for a little bit too long, and then you then throw in like the fart jokes and stuff like that in there, and it was like this is not what I'm like here for. It's not what I'm like. You know, it's not what's gonna get me laughing in this movie.
Yeah, I'm not above a good fart joke. I'm a big fan of Bob's Burgers, and that's full of that. Like they have a Wharf Arts Center in Bob's Burgers, and they call it the Wharf Arts Center. And I'm always a big fan of that. So like a well constructed fart joke is a beautiful thing, and it doesn't feel like it was all that. Like they didn't quite, like they kind of phoned that one in a little bit.
How do we feel about Frank Dreben in this movie?
I kind of liked him. I think Liam Neeson is the right fit for this. Like he's kind of like the logical conclusion. Like there actually was like a comedy show like 20 years ago where the joke was that Liam Neeson wants to do comedy and nobody thinks he can do it because he's so one note as an actor otherwise. But I think, yeah, this is exactly he's exactly the kind of actor that this needs, right? Like this, like similar to Leslie Nielsen. Like you need an actor who is just completely serious all the time, and he if he was winking at the camera, it wouldn't work. And I think he does that, right? Like I think he plays that part really well. Just felt like there was a little bit something, like he's a little bit of a blank slate, right? Like Frank Dreben was also a little bit of a blank slate, and there was never really a consistent personality, or like a very like or specific traits or whatever. It always kind of changed according to the needs of the joke a little bit. But I think he, like, overall, I think he was the right pick, and he's exactly the kind of performance you need for this kind of character.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he really served the movie really well, just in terms of, again, like I said, being deadpan, being quite serious in very unserious circumstances, and just, for the most part, ignoring the absurdity of what's going on, and delivering certain lines that are ridiculous, but with the utmost seriousness behind them, just to sort of add that comedic effect to it. So yeah, I don't think I've got any issues with him, and I think he worked really well in this movie as a whole. Any thoughts on?
I was going to say, how about Beth?
I thought she was great. I thought she was like perfectly fine. I thought she really captured the whole love interest, but also given a little bit more to do in terms of it was her brother that died, and she was trying to get her, like, sort of her revenge for her brother, and things like that. I thought it worked quite fine. I wouldn't say that I found her all the way funny in this, and I don't know whether she was meant to be all the way funny in this movie. I thought she was just a nice addition to Liam Neeson's character, because again, from the first movie, it's established that divorced or widowed cop that's sort of jaded on love for whatever reason, and they just kind of like chuck in this love interest. So yeah, I thought she served her purpose quite fine. Although I don't think there was any particular funny moment, and they repeated that whole gag of when he first met her, or I don't think it was when he first met her, but when she's like walking over and she like walks into a wall or walks into a pillar or whatever, I was a bit like, okay, that's we saw that in the first movie and it wasn't funny then, it's not funny now.
Yeah, they kind of try to tie her to the Priscilla Presley character in the first one a little bit, right? Yeah, she doesn't do all that much funny. She just basically needs to deliver ridiculous lines with a straight face, and that's pretty much that pretty much happens. So kind of she kind of does the job, right? I like a lot of the noir jokes, and how she kind of plays into that stereotype, and and they have a little bit of fun with it, but it's not really in her performance, really, right? Like it's she basically just plays that straight, and then the movie makes it funny, like especially by adding the narration and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I think like she does a fine job. What did you think about the dream, like the not it's not a dream sequence exactly, but like their montage where they fall in love? That looks like an 80s music video.
I thought that was cool. So yeah, I thought that was fine. Again, like with this movie, I don't think anything was really offensively bad for the most part. I thought everything was like and like kind of like nice, cool level throughout the whole movie, and I think that's one where I was just like, okay, cool, like it's fine. Like I think the best part of that was the killer snowman that they had, even though that was just like just a little bit above fine per se, but that whole like montage, I was just be like, okay, whatever, pretty much.
Yeah, it's kind of a reference to the first movie, right? Where they also have this falling in love montage, right? That gets kind of increasingly wacky, and here it's kind of starts off like fairly normal and kind of what you expect, and then it escalates, but escalates multiple times and takes a couple of twists, where actually the snowman is kind of the wronged party, right? Like he was actually brought to life against his will, and then he was kind of frozen out of this love triangle, and then but it takes a couple of twists, right, over the course of like 2 minutes. It kind of tells this kind of off the wall story that kind of comes out of nowhere, and I really enjoyed that. That kind of brings me to my next question, which is, does the noir thing work? Because this has not really been a thing in a long time. Like basically noir has kind of been kind of a joke for a long time now, right? Like it's been a long time since those kinds of tropes, and the narration and the slow jazz music and the weary cop who has given up on all morals and whatever, and is just there to do a job. Now that's it's a long time. It's been decades, right? Like, I don't think it's been I think in our lifetime really. So is it is it an effective spoof if you spoof something that's already a joke?
Was it not in the first movie? Correct me if I'm wrong. Was it not
The
that
noir thing I
this
don't think
level?
was.
Was there any narration in that first movie, in the original
I
movie?
think there was some voiceover, right? But like here they really lean into it, like with the saxophone and the way the Beth is portrayed and described and all of that. Like that's all very heavy out of the noir cliche playbook. And I think Frank had an internal monologue in the first movie, but it wasn't that kind.
Okay, okay. Yeah, because I think when I was watching it, I was like trying to compare or like remember if they done it in the original movie. But for me, I don't think I took it completely as a joke, as as some others may have. Just more so because I don't think I see noir as a joke, to be honest, and that's like maybe me not being sort of super familiar with many noir movies or the genre as a whole. I think my strongest reference to that genre would be Spider Noir from the Spider Verse movies, which is probably a little bit offensive to people who maybe love the noir genre. So I'm probably not the best like reference point for whether spoofing something that's already a bit of a joke really works or not. For me, I liked it. For me, I thought it was cool. For me, I think it added a nice little element to the movie. It added um, something a little bit different to Frank Dreben's character in this movie as well, and especially when he's first meeting Leslie. I think it's Leslie, right? When he's first meeting Leslie in the police station, and you have that whole kind of scene where he's like first like seeing her and stuff like that. I thought it was all good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So the thing is, for me, the most recent noir thing I watched was Veronica Mars, which is a noir crime story that's set in a California high school. It's a wonderful show, and I have to do a video about it at some point. But that was kind of already referencing kind of the noir tropes, and kind of was and at that point it was already old, and that was 20 years ago. So like noir movies are not a thing right now, and they certainly, and if they are, or if somebody uses those tropes, it's kind of jokey, like not like at least at the level of cliche. And so like I'm not exactly complaining here because I like those tropes, and some of my favorite jokes in this movie, like the constant like the way like how absurd the internal monologue is, and then the whole thing about the entire police department having an internal monologue and kind of talking over each other. Those are some of my favorite jokes in this movie. But I'm more asking, should this have referred to something current, like from this decade, to spoof? Or is it not even a spoof at this point? It's just its own thing.
I think the most current thing you can maybe refer it to is the whole like breaking the fourth wall that you kind of get from Deadpool or like She Hulk or something like that. Um, I'm trying to think of like other areas where there's a lot of that kind of like narration or something along those lines where you're kind of feeding that information into the movie. Feel free to kind of like jump in and give other examples, but from like what I can think of like current would be the breaking of the fourth wall or something along those lines to try and maybe replace the noir element of it and try to like spoof something again, like kind of like spoofing a spoof, because like obviously breaking the fourth wall is meant to be done to a comedic effect. Not all the time, but I think the most popular versions of it is the Deadpool ones, where again he's just kind of like winking to the audience and making a bunch of jokes. So I don't know how well that would have worked in this particular movie, but I guess when you're, I think with the cast and with the target audience for the movie as well being a little bit older in terms of the demographic, I think the noir element does work because it just kind of like speaks to something that they are familiar with and speaks to something that they understand. And I don't think they would have understood the element of breaking the fourth wall or anything like that. Even though they do it at the very end, you know, during the credits, they kind of break the fourth wall a bit, and I think that was fine. But I don't think you could have done that throughout the whole movie. So again, feel free to kind of like jump in and just like give another example of something that they could have done as an alternative.
So the freeze frame thing at the end was actually a reference to the Police Squad series, where every episode would would end on a freeze frame, but actually it's just the actors holding still, and they would increasingly struggle to keep still as the credits rolled, and then they would eventually break. There was like a running joke where they did that at the end of every episode, so that's what that is referring to. Also, the meta-textual thing, like breaking the fourth wall and or the postmodern stuff, that's already 20, 30 years old, so that's not even a new idea either. And it's like, I'm more asking, like, should this have spoofed something that is in movies right now? But then I'm kind of coming up blank because it's not like crime dramas are all that popular right now, right? Like police procedurals and stuff like that have kind of been out of fashion for almost a decade. Like Brooklyn Nine-Nine was like 10 years ago, something like that, right? And that ran out of steam after a couple of seasons. So I'm not entirely like, I'm not saying it had to be, it should have been this one thing, and because it isn't, it's bad. It's more like it felt like, I don't, I'm not entirely sure. Like Airplane referenced a disaster movie that was, at that point 30 years old, but like that kind of disaster movie is something that has been around for a while, and that gets made seriously. Police Squad, like police procedurals, especially in the 80s, were a relatively big thing, and now it seems like we're just referencing the original Naked Gun as opposed to spoofing something. Like, in order to spoof something, it has to be something that's being done seriously today. You know what I mean? So again, not saying the movie is bad because of this. It's more like it felt a little bit detached from everything else as a result. And it's kind of like the only thing you need to have seen to get the jokes is the original Naked Gun, right? Which is not the worst thing. It's more like it's something that occurred to me as I was watching it.
It almost makes it a little bit more difficult to grab a newer audience, would you say, as well, because it's not something that's current, and I don't know how many people of today's age has watched the original Naked Gun, so it's not something that speaks to the younger crowd, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not cleaning up exactly, right? It's made like 25 million in the first weekend, 28 million, and people seem to mostly like it. Like reviews seem to be all over the place, where some really like it and some really hate it. And it really comes down to whether enough jokes for you to really be enjoyable. But it's like if this had been made 15 years ago, it would have spoofed like CSI and that sort of thing, right? Like these overly self-serious police procedurals that just churn out case after case, and they're all kind of the same. And it's very jargony, it's very science babble focused, that sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like that would have been the thing to spoof 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And I'm just wondering, like, maybe they did this because there's nothing right now that's that big, right? Like, I couldn't even think of what they should have done, right? Because it's just not the kind of TV that's really big right now. So, but it's more like, again, less of a complaint and more of an observation.
Anything else we want to touch on?
Did this save comedy?
For a certain audience, potentially. As a whole, because I do feel like enough people do like it. I do feel like enough people got enough out of it. And how much did you say it made at the box office?
28 against a $42 million budget.
Oh, so that's not currently. I don't think that's a good return, and I don't know if that may break even. That may turn a profit at some potentially. I'm not entirely sure.
It's not setting the world on fire. Word of mouth is not that great. Like people seem to largely like it, but it's not like people are raving, "Oh, you have to see this." And I really doubt this will more than double, right? So this needs 100 million to break even, and I wonder if it goes over 60, because it doesn't seem to have those kinds of legs. It doesn't seem to, like, we'll see what happens in the second weekend, but it doesn't seem like people are loving it enough to see it multiple times and for word of mouth to really catch on like that. So this might be a box office loss.
Do you feel like it came out at the wrong time? Because I know a lot of horror movies are either earlier in the year or a lot later in the year, and I think this has come out in the midst of summer with like some heavy hitters in and around it, like Superman, which is still in cinemas, Fantastic Four, Jurassic World, etc. I I don't know whether this was the best placement for this particular movie because I don't think it's like a summer blockbuster movie, even though I think the budget for this is a little bit higher than I thought it would be, and I think maybe if it was in a more quieter period, I think it probably could have done a little bit better. But I don't know. I'm not like a box office expert, but I just don't I don't see how it benefits from having like so many other big franchises out at the same time, where people are kind of like, not maybe not catching it in the first week, but catching it in the second week, or maybe doing like rewatches of movies that they really enjoyed already.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I feel like in February, March, this would have cleaned up because it would have been by far the best thing, and it would have stood out against the like in this year in February, March, we had a lot of self-serious horror movies where it was kind of depressing, and like this could might have been effective counter programming, and people are also not exhausted from having watched three big blockbusters in 4 weeks, right? So I don't know, like nobody knows, right? Like nobody knows what would have happened had they released 6 months later or earlier. But it's but just by itself, right? Like fast forward 5 years, and this is on streaming, and you can buy the Blu-ray and whatever. Is this like a big classic? Does this get imitated? Does this spark a new passion for comedy?
I don't. I personally don't think so. And the reason for that is I don't think it relates enough to the modern audience or the younger audience to really sort of capture imagination and really have legs to spark further interest in it. To be honest, you kind of couple that with its box office and really how much its potentially gonna make overall, and I think it's I don't think it's a big miss because I think it has enough critical acclaim to it and enough critical success to maybe even like have one more from this particular sort of franchise. But I don't think it's done enough to really win over the modern audience to get them out seeing this movie and enjoying this movie and wanting more comedies like it. And I wonder, like, I think Scary Movie has a bigger chance of doing that for me personally, but that's dependent on how they make the movie and which direction they go with that. I think it could go either way with that movie, but for this one, I don't completely think so.
And Scary Movie is coming out next year, right? So yeah, so we'll see. Like this is a very different. Like this is not as silly, right? Like this was always the more serious, not serious, but like more. This had more gravitas, right? Whereas Scary Movie was always more sillier, silly voices, stuff like that, kind of humor. So we'll see how that shakes out. But you have a feeling that anybody who went to see this was already watching airplane clips on TikTok. You know what I mean? Like it's and I think a couple of jokes in this will make it into that rotation, but it's I don't think it's iconic enough, and I don't think it really captures enough people's imagination to say, oh yeah, I never like I thought comedies were played out, but I really enjoyed this, so I want to see the next one. And I don't really see this being so successful that a lot of studios will rush to make like 10 knockoffs and three of them are good or two of them are good, right? Like I think that was the optimistic scenario, right? Like this, like people get really really into this, and then we get like several years worth of mostly bad knockoffs but a couple of good ones in the mix. Like that's what happens whenever something gets really popular, and I don't really see that happening here, which is a shame because I mostly like this, but it's more like Naked Gun 2 seems like it could, like if that gets made, could reform the formula a little bit and maybe make the jokes hit like refine the jokes a little bit or whatever. But like by itself, I don't know that this did very much.
Cool. I guess with that, lost thoughts.
Yeah, so bottom line for me is I liked watching this. I like that this got made. I think this makes a lot of the right choices. It's just falls a little bit short of being great, and the jokes are mostly good, but only a couple really don't land for me, two or three. and and there's enough here that are that are really actually funny, where I actually enjoyed what they were doing. It's more like this feels a little bit underpolished, where it feels like they could have dialed the knob up, like if we need to go to 11, this was like an 8, that sort of thing. And it's like I'm happy I saw this, and I want to see it again, but it's more like, but it's not setting the world on fire, right? So for that reason, overall rating is like a 5 out of 8. So good, not great. Could have been much better. Could have been much worse.
Yeah, for me, I think from this discussion, I think I kind of realized I liked a little bit more of the jokes than I first realized in the movie. I thought it was fine. Again, it's not all the way my type of humor. It's not 100% my type of humor, but I did appreciate it for what it was attempting to do comedy wise. I think definitely definitely one that you should check out, because you never know how a movie like this will hit you. I think definitely give it a go, see if it works for you, see if it lands for you. I think there's definitely enough jokes and enough variety in the jokes that there'll be some type of sort of a successful hit rate for you with the jokes in this movie. But yeah, I think overall for me it's just personal preference over anything. I don't think the movie, and I think the story behind it is also like serviceable enough. It's actually also actually quite engaging, which really helped with getting through the movie. So yeah, I guess with that I give it a 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, and there's one more thing that kind of I remembered as we were talking about this, or as you were giving your rating, which is I think the marketing for this has been on point. Like I complained so much about trailers being terrible and not selling the movie and not being honest or accurate or informative about what it is the movie is about and why you should like it and whether you will like it, that sort of thing. And this really did. Like this was probably the best marketing campaign since Deadpool 3 last year, where they really understood why this was what the product was and who they had to sell it to and how they had to sell it. Like it had just the right amount of silliness, and the way, like, I think the trailer was like, I think with the first time I saw the trailer, I thought, oh, this is actually funny, and actually this actually makes me want to watch the movie, and it's a rare thing for trailers. So just want to mention, like, special mention to the marketing of this, who actually did their job well this time around, which is not like it's not guaranteed. And I think you know it's unclear how much this actually helped the movie, but they certainly, like, they did their job, right?
I guess with that we've reached the end of the episode. So if you reach this point, thank you very much for working with us. We appreciate your support.
So if you've made it this far into the video and you like what we're doing, please tell a friend. And if you hate what we do, please tell an enemy.
You heard it here first. See you later.
Bye bye.